Tottenham are undoubtedly the most frustrating team to watch in the Premier League this season. With every win over Manchester City or Aston Villa, there is an unexplainable defeat to Crystal Palace or Ipswich. Ange Postecoglou's side are staking a claim for a top four finish one week or contemplating the very thought of sacking the Australian manager the next. What's clearly at fault here is a lack of consistency, and in this video I want to explain why Ange Postecoglou's team seem to go from hero to zero so dramatically from one match day to the next, and hopefully explain what's going wrong and whether Tottenham can fix things before it gets too late this season. As all Spurs fans will likely know, the team seem to have little trouble creating chances and scoring goals against big teams or mid-table clubs that play high lines against them. But the big issue in what seems to be derailing their league campaign to date is their inability to break teams down that sit deep and force Postecoglou's side to unlock a stubborn defence. The club's results to date tell us this much. But what's really interesting is that the underlying numbers really highlight how much Tottenham thrive in big games, but continue to slip up against the minnows. For example, in their first 11 games of the season, Tottenham have averaged an XG of 2.98 against top teams in the league that are content with playing a high line against Postecoglou's side. That, remarkably, is almost twice the XG Tottenham averaged in 5 games against Leicester, Everton, West Ham, Crystal Palace and Ipswich. And that's without even taking into account the recent League Cup win over Pep Guardiola's Manchester City. It's worth noting here that the win over Man United does pump these numbers up, since Postecoglou's side picked up 5.41 XG in that match against a 10-man opponent. But it's also worth bearing in mind that Spurs had racked up an XG of 2.09 before Bruno Fernandes decided to get himself sent off. And as anyone who watched that game will tell you, Postecoglou's side were certainly racking up the chances long before their hosts went a man down. Perhaps the biggest issue for Tottenham is the way that they score goals. Postecoglou has always favoured a high-intensity style of football that allows his teams to harass opposing sides into giving them the ball and then counter-attacking with speed. To no great surprise, this is how Spurs have succeeded in scoring this season, with more goals coming from counter-attacks than any other team in the Premier League. And as we can see in the table, only Fulham and Nottingham Forest averaged more counter-attacks per game than Tottenham this season. But there are obvious faults to that style of play. While it may work well against Brentford or Aston Villa, teams like Crystal Palace and Ipswich are happy to sit deep and close the gaps in the defence that Tottenham would so readily break through. It's not exactly rocket science, but it obviously makes sense that a counter-attacking team would struggle when their opponents don't allow them to counter-attack. But I think the problem gets compounded when we consider the fact that the two players up front for Tottenham, Dominic Solanke and Brennan, are first and foremost counter-attacking forwards, and as such, they struggle when Tottenham struggle. Indeed, we can see Tottenham's issues against smaller teams play out when we look at both forwards' strike rate in the Premier League this season. Against the so-called better teams, Johnson has averaged 0.72 xG per 90, and Solanke has averaged 1.06 xG per 90. Both numbers are extremely impressive and point to players that enjoy playing against high lines and running in behind defences. The issues come when we look at their record against smaller clubs. Here, Johnson's average drops by 21% to 0.57 xG per 90, and Solanke's completely nosedives by a massive 87% to just 0.14 xG per 90. This, unsurprisingly, is mirrored in both players' goal-scoring records this season, where Johnson has scored his league goals against Brentford, Man United, Brighton and Aston Villa, while Solanke scored his goals against Brentford, Man United and Aston Villa. Despite both players playing the full 90 minutes against Crystal Palace and Ipswich, neither managed to find the back of the net. That's a huge problem for Tottenham and perhaps the main reason behind their struggles this season against smaller clubs. To be fair to both players, they are only doing what worked so well for them at their previous clubs. Johnson came from Nottingham Forest when they were fighting off relegation at the bottom of the Premier League table, and Solanke spearheaded a Bournemouth side that were perhaps the most direct team in the English top flight last season. In both cases, these players had plenty of experience counter-attacking, but not a huge amount in having to break down low blocks and working with tight spaces in the opposing box. So how did Tottenham fix this problem? Well, I suspect that nothing will change if Postecoglou doesn't tweak his system and finds a way for Tottenham to break down these deep, stubborn defences. But I also think in time, these forward players, Johnson and Solanke, will find a way to adapt and learn how to score goals against deeper defences as well as they do against high defensive lines. After all, Tottenham know how to score goals, and the likes of Johnson and Solanke are perfectly capable of adapting their game to new tactics. This team can beat the very best in England, and once they find a way to show a little more consistency, Postecoglou's team could be a real contender for the top four come the end of the season.